the fourth when one of us is weak, the other will pick us up. Thanks. Thank you.
Presenter is open. View. No, view, it'll go. Yep. That's okay. Whatever. Perfect. Welcome, everybody. Actually, Sam, I can relate. Anyone that knows me knows I have a major bird phobia. It involves Egypt and a bat, and I cannot take any flying or creepy birds either. But this is a tough act to follow. But thank you for that. We're really happy to see all of these beautiful faces. This is actually more than we ever expected. Welcome to our fourth annual CWF conference, but our very first marriage conference. You asked, so we listened. We are an archdiocese-wide ministry. So our vision is to inspire you to strengthen your family and build up the Coptic Orthodox community one home at a time. We can't do this without the support of His Grace Bishop David and without Abuna Wasis, so we thank you for your support. Thank you to God first and foremost. He's really truly blessed this service. We feel His hand in every challenge and in every closed door. And they do close sometimes, but He always makes it immeasurably more than we can ever imagine. I think, how many churches in New Jersey now? 28? 28 churches just in New Jersey. So we want to bridge the gap between the churches and collectively build this force that unites all of us in love, in fellowship, in expertise. We have a lot to learn from each other. So this marriage conference today, God willing, will teach God's design for marriage, understanding intimacy, and tools that will strengthen your communication and your connection together. You're going to strengthen healthy marriages and hopefully, God willing, heal troubled ones. And this is how you can stay connected with us, by the way. So follow us. I hear a lot of people say, I didn't hear about this. Can I register? There's all kinds of ways to stay connected. So just look us up. And we have a website, too. We want to thank all of our sponsors. These are Coptic-owned businesses: PNF Financial, Trinity Rehab, Summit Benefits Group, Bergenfield Dental Associates. They support us year after year, and we can't do this without their support, so thank you. We are excited. We put together a very beautiful day for you today. It is an exceptional panel that you guys have today. I hope you realize that you're getting some incredible speakers who are very well versed in their fields, and it's such a blessing. I'm learning from them always. You can see the schedule in your booklets, actually. And then the servants made this beautiful booklet with QR codes on the back for everything. You can scan the slides, the anonymous questions and answers. You can submit your questions all day long. And we will answer them for you at the end of the program, maybe even in between, and all your questions will be anonymous. If you're brave enough, you can also raise your hands, and we'll pass you a mic. We want to share, we want to learn from each other. There is also more QR codes there, but I think they explain what they're all about. So you are going to have a very long day, a full day. So, I want you to get comfortable, ask questions, and know that we're here to learn from each other. Today, we're discussing a lot of... Mic drop. Oh, here I am. Okay. A lot of truths in your marriage, okay? And we're going to give you a lot of tools, hopefully. Okay. There are some things that are going to jump out at you and really resonate with you. Write it down. You have a pen and you have a pad. Make a mental note. But resist the temptation to write down the things that you want your spouse to hear. Okay? I've done it. So resist doing this to make sure that they're paying attention. In wisdom, let us attend. You're not here to fix your spouse. You need to be listening for you. The only person that has control over it, to do any work in your marriage is you. So keep that in mind. Early on in my marriage, I didn't have any of this. We didn't have access to these beautiful conferences or any of these resources. It was kind of like bil baraka, with the blessing. So I learned a little bit the hard way. I used to call up my father of confession after a little bit of argument, and then get on the phone, Salam Abuna, all of a sudden angelic. And by the way, he is patient, he is kind, he is wise, he is here. Welcome, Abuna Masiz. Anyway, and I'd make an appointment to go see him. I'd walk in, and I guess according to how, I'm sorry, I'm messing up your really expensive mic, Yamisha. Okay. According to how I walked in, he'd say, Hey, أختي, أنت جاية تعترفي ولا جاية تشتكي? Are you coming here to complain, or are you coming here to confess? And I was confused. I'm like, both? He'd laugh and say, marriage is long suffering. But Abuna, long. So, Yalan Salli. I say, okay. God is the author and designer of your marriage. God designed your marriage to be the most important human relationship that there is. It takes priority over everyone and everything else. It's that love from God that unites husband and wife, which is why we don't exchange vows, right, at our wedding ceremony, because we as Orthodox, it's Christ who unites us. Our commitment to marriage is our commitment to Christ. There's this picture painted about the absolute power of romance and date nights and saving marriage. Last week, Kareem and I celebrated 20 years of marriage. I'll save you the math. I was like 10 years old when who here's been married 20 and more? Raise your hands. Wow. So a bunch of us. We're all here, surviving, still thriving. All of these tools of date nights and romance and communication, all of these have been helpful tools in improving our marriage. All of these things should be intentional parts of a healthy and thriving marriage, but they've never once saved us when we were in those valleys, because in those seasons, romance is not really on anyone's mind, right? Instead, we turn to prayer, because we live in this world that despises the sacrificial side of marriage and family. The messages are strive for power, the upper hand in a relationship. We're fooled into thinking that love is about doing what makes us happy. And the second we feel less than happy, we're encouraged to bail and stop investing. That's wrong. So the more we give, the better we become. Real love is not self-seeking. It will always cost you. It will cost you some comfort, a little bit of your mind. It'll cost you your pride. It will cost you to lay your life down for the life of another. What I've noticed with Kareem and I, when we have not been as intentional about checking in with each other as we should, the differences that we both have become really annoying and can lead to conflict. So, and I've noticed that men and women process things very differently, right? Would you all agree? You know, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We react to things differently. Many books written on this topic, and we hear about it all the time. So humor me a little bit, let's take a peek inside the female mind. It's like the complex, interconnected superhighway, right? It never stops. There's no rest even at night. Everything is connected. That's why we always feel tired, right? Here's the male mind. Let's get to it, right? One box at a time, like Mark Runger says, right? One road at a time. Here's an example of this, for example. Let's take a look at this. How women choose shampoo. And I'm guilty of this. It adds volume. It adds shine. It's softening. It's keratin. It's color. It smells good. It's sulfate-free, paraben-free. And my favorite, it's limited edition. How men choose shampoo. What do you think it's going to say? Bottle shampoo. Okay, here's another example. When women get sick, okay? It's okay. I'm just a little tired. I might be walking pneumonia, but it's okay. I'll take some extra vitamins. Zicam will do the trick. And ladies, tell me if you've been like, if I go to sleep now and I get 1, 2, what time is it? And calculate all the hours, I'll be good. I can do X, Y, and Z, right? We've all been there. When men get sick. Sorry. Listen to me carefully, woman. These may be my very last words. Not my husband, though. He's a soldier. Reasons why we attend a conference such as this. So many reasons why we attend. Fellowship, service, quality time with our friends. Make sure her husband is listening. To grow, to learn, to be a good example for her kids, to take a break from her kids. Why do men attend a conference? Free food? I didn't put that up there, but that's a good one. There's also another reason. So, we have a beautiful day planned for you today. I would love if we could get back to that pure, beautiful love, right? And inspire you to lead in love. And our hope is, at the end of the day today, you will have heard about some of the best practices in your marriage that will last a lifetime. Matthew 18:2-4 says, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Remember that love in its purest form? We turn to some of the experts. Uh-oh. Pray? Play? Ready?
Love means when your dad takes you somewhere, like to the zoo. Love is something where you treat people kind and you respect them and take care of them, and you have fun together. And when they get hurt, you make them feel better. It means you love them in your heart. It means that you're really special.
Love is when you really wanted that last bite, but when you gave it away. Oh, and love is when Dad cleaned out the poop on your shoe when you stepped in it. And love is your family.
Go ahead.
Love means family.
Love means family. Perfect.
You and you want to kiss you and hug you. It means that you really want to like hug someone and you like really love
Can't see
them.
you.
Want to marry. And you want to marry. Yeah, and you want to like hug them and kiss them. Yeah. I know my mom loves me because she takes me to my favorite places. I love Mommy's kisses. And I love when Mommy gives me lots of presents. Love is from God. Love is, I think, you love you. You love me. I know my mommy loves me because that she lets me have the breakfast I want in the morning. Love means when I get to have ice cream for dinner.
Hi, Timmy. Hi, Emma. Timothy, what does love mean to you?
I love you.
Emma, what does love mean to you?
I take a book of you.
Oh, you take a bosa of me? Okay, how about you, Emma? I love you means you can give a person a hug. Okay, say bye.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, this is better. So, I am actually honored today to introduce to you Dr. Philip Mamalakis. I joke with Dr. Philip and tell him he's my favorite Greek on the whole island and the whole planet. With his wife, Georgia, and his 7 kids, they live in Boston, Massachusetts, where he's an assistant professor of pastoral care at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. Dr. Mamalakis directs the field education program and teaches classes on pastoral care, marriage and family, grief, death and dying, and topics related to pastoral counseling. He has a private practice in Newton, Massachusetts, where he works with individuals, couples, and families. Dr. Mamalakis has a PhD from Purdue University in child development and family studies, specializing in marriage and family therapy. He's been offering parenting courses and writing on parenting for 21 years, probably more. He enjoys leading seminars and retreats on intimacy, relationships, marriage, parenting, and family life, as well as on orthodoxy and psychology. His book, by the way, which I believe everyone should have a copy of, Parenting Toward the Kingdom, is an excellent resource, and it's a community favorite of ours. I often reference your work, Dr. Mamalakis. You've become a mentor to me, and I'm very happy to have you here with us. Please welcome Dr. Philip Mamalakis.
Good morning. I would just want to begin by thanking Sylvia and everyone who put in such time and effort for us to be here today. It's a huge effort to organize all the aspects of the conference, including dealing with these presenters, who can be difficult at times. Also the blessing. The blessing is for me, and thank you for that beautiful introduction where we got a little snapshot of all the different dimensions of love from all the kids. It seems like everyone gave a little piece of what we might understand love. And what I'd like to talk about is God's plan for marriage. It was really nice to have that couple speak. Sam and Monica, that was great. It's nice to hear couples talk, and it's so sweet how they connected, you know, and the nice things they said about each other. And they've been married 7 years, and you could tell they're learning about each other. And that's kind of why we get married, right? Well, I think that's the place I'd like to start, is why do we get married? Why do we get married? Well, if we were a smaller crowd, I might ask you to share, but it's a pretty big hall. So I'll give you the types of things that I've seen and what I've experienced. Before I do, I also really want to encourage you to ask questions. ask those anonymous questions because I'd really like to know how you're thinking, what you're experiencing, and we're here today to think about our own marriage. So if any questions come up, do that little code thing, and I think we're going to really have time to get to them. So it's a funny thing. Everyone gets married across cultures, in different countries. People are always choosing to get married, even in cultures where, they don't even believe in God. I think about Hollywood. They get married and then they get married repeatedly. It's like something drives people to get married. What is that? What drives us to get married? Well, we might say we want kids. We want family. We see that, and we can tell because nowadays you can bypass the marriage entirely and just have kids. And so some people choose that. But some people get married to have kids. Some people get married for financial stability. Some people get married to leave mom and dad. Some people get married because, isn't this what everyone is doing at this age? But if we look a little deeper into why people get married, and when I ask couples, they say things like companionship. I'm really looking for someone to walk through life with, to share my life with. I want a companion. And the backside of that is, I don't like being alone. And when sometimes we think about marriage, I get married so I won't be alone, to kind of cure my loneliness. People get married because it's kind of nice to care for someone and have someone care for me. That's kind of nice. I'm looking for someone to care for me, or I'm looking to care for someone. And the backside of that is it feels meaningful to me to care for someone. We look to get married to find meaning and purpose in our lives. We look for marriage because there's something we're longing for, someone to know us deeply, and someone for us to get to know. But not really just to get to know. We're kind of longing for someone who can know us deeply and love us, that we have this longing to be known and loved. And it's a particular type of love that we're kind of looking for. We're looking for that love where someone knows our good gifts, our abilities, and our disabilities, and they still love us. And we look for that in marriage. We call that love unconditional love. And so we get married looking for that. Maybe we get married to learn about ourselves, to grow. When I ask couples, they say things like, I'm looking for someone to complete me, to make me whole. And sometimes we just get married because we fall in love. What is that? We have this strong connection with someone, strong feelings of affection and attraction. That's really nice. That feels really good. And we think, I could do that for the rest of my life. Of course, people get married for all sorts of different reasons. But when you look at all those reasons share one thing in common. All those reasons are about myself and what I want. That I am looking for these things. And I want to find someone who will give me these things. I want to find someone who will love me, who will complete me, enrich my life, give purpose to my life, maybe heal me, so I can become a better version of myself. And that is a deep longing that each one of us has. In fact, I'm going to suggest God created us with that deep inner longing for that type of love, to be fully known and to be fully loved. We are wired to long for that. The only thing we have to do is find the right person. Because if we find the right person, who's going to give us that. You know, our soulmate, right? That's the story. That is what I call the powerful myth of marriage. And, you know, I've traveled around. My parents are from Greece, and the myth exists elsewhere, but it's also a dominant myth in America, that I will find someone to give me that. You know, that's what the movies are about. And we read books on that. You know, it's like the movie The Notebook, right? Isn't that beautiful? That you find some guy who's completely different than you, completely different socioeconomic status, kind of manipulative in the way he pulls you in, a little unstable, and somehow he's the one who's meant for you, and you're going to live your whole life perfectly together and die 30 minutes apart. How is that not beautiful? Just imagine being my daughters next to me watching that movie. But that is the myth. And it's such a powerful myth that that's what marriage is. It's actually such a deep internal longing and desire that drives us to believe that myth, despite all the evidence to the contrary. We hang on to that myth. Because we might believe at first, we found this person, our soulmate, and we marry. And we usually spend way too much money, not on the ceremony, but on the reception after. And we have all these hopes and expectations of that myth, that this is what marriage is going to be like. Some of us say, unlike my parents, I am going to do this the right way. And we embark on this journey with these expectations and these hopes. And slowly, we get to know our spouse and possibly ourselves. And we start running into things, and our expectations don't get met. Not only is our spouse not providing us with that unconditional love that we long for, but this guy's pretty selfish. He's got a lot of problems. This girl, she's kind of mean to me. She's kind of self-centered. It's very disappointing. And oftentimes the biggest struggle we have in marriage is not so much the normal conflicts on the path, but the crashing of what we longed for and what we hoped for, our expectations. And so what we try and do then is the first instinct is we'll try and fix this spouse so that they can meet my needs. If you would just be a little more perfect or quit doing that stuff, maybe I could tolerate it. But when that inevitably fails, we have a kind of crisis. What's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture is the why we're getting married. If we, and not if we, there were a lot of hands that went up 20 years, because we entered into marriage with what are actually these self-centered expectations, longings, and desires. And I'm looking for someone to meet those needs. That's inherently selfish and inherently self-centered. What would you say to a man who came up to me? All right, I'm going to do something real quickly. Hi, Georgia. You're on the last drive of the football game, and you're on the 2-yard line. Well, guess what? My talk started before 11, and I'm at the podium, so I can't talk right now. Take a video. Bye. I did tell her I started at 11, so I thought I deserved to answer the call. And let me make my point and then comment on why a speaker would answer a cell phone from the podium. It's almost entirely inappropriate, except for the content of our conversation. Right? What would you say to someone who you meet and said, you know what? I want you, I'm looking for you to meet my needs and desires. You up for it for like 50 years? What would you say to someone who approached you with that? Well, we instinctively know when we encounter that type of self-centeredness, I don't want that. Because I'm looking for love, and that's not love. What in fact happens with couples is that we kind of mutually agree to meet each other's self-centered needs. That's called infatuation, powerful affection. And it's really intense. And it's got real strong feelings. They make movies about that. That I found someone who can meet my needs simultaneously. That I'm looking to get and she is looking to get. And it kind of works for a little while. And it's really exciting. We say things like the sparks are flying. We immediately connected so deeply. We experience that. The greater our neediness, the greater the sparks. The only difficulty is, once you start engaging in life with someone, and you have to learn to work with someone, manage a home, raise a family, the stresses of life, and the normal, appropriate differences and conflicts come up. She's kind of annoying. He's kind of a jerk. That's not how he was when we were dating. That's not how she was. And those feelings of affection, attraction, those sparks kind of, they die. And if we think those sparks are love, we think the love has died. And if we were looking for someone to love us with perfect love, we know where the problem is, right over there in that person. So now let me take a little sidetrack about this cell phone interruption. Typically, I don't take the phone at the podium. However, when I'm teaching, I will take a call. Because how long did that call take? You know, under 30 seconds, right? 15 seconds. I'm going to be gone all day today. I'm not going to see her until 10 o'clock at night. The only contact I will have is through a text. She texted me right when I sat down. And in that 10 seconds, she's like, are you at the podium? She didn't wait for an answer. She's like, they're on the 2-yard line. She drove the kids to football in Boston. And she wanted to share something with me. Why did she want to share something with me? To stay connected, right? So I could ignore her call. I could get mad at her. Or I could just say, I'm at a podium, take a video. What happens in marriage is we start thinking like that gets in the way, or she gets in the way. And we miss the fact that I'm going to travel and give presentations, but ultimately I'm going to retire. We're going to parent together, but ultimately the kids are going to leave. She's going to be doing all that she does, and ultimately it's going to be the two of us. Most of our time is spent out at work and doing stuff. But our priority is our spouse. And there are simple things we can do to keep our spouse as a priority in the midst of the work. I don't need to leave the podium and go talk to her. It's a football game. I'm working. I can't talk right now. It just takes 15 seconds to communicate that. So anyway, I recommend in the busyness of life, it's not a reason for us to lose connection. There are simple strategies to keep connection. So, life starts weighing on us. The temptation then, when our spouse does not live up to our hopes and expectations, is to focus on our spouse's failures and faults, which are legion, right? Let alone what happens in life, we experience the hurt, the betrayal, the abandonment, the criticism, maybe mockings and put-downs. Do you think my wife was really thinking about me when she made that call? I'm just saying. Do you think I was really thinking about her when I took that call? No. She was thinking about her kids and the football game, and I was thinking about the next paragraph I'm going to read. right? We'll explain why we behave like that. But ultimately, when we find that this person is not going to live up to it, we might conclude the problem is over there, I married the wrong person, and my marriage is fatally flawed. With the affection, intimacy sparks dying, it can be really, really painful, really, really lonely, and all those things I was hoping to fix or fulfill in marriage, all of a sudden they kind of come up, and I'm in that same place I was before I was married. And at this point, people may choose to end the marriage. And as divorce becomes more socially accepted and financially viable, we divorce and try it again. That longing is real. I'm going to propose that that longing is good that we have for that type of intimacy and love because God crafted us like that, and we know He did a good job. We were created to be loved unconditionally, known completely, even in our imperfections. In that type of love, we were created to heal and to grow. We are made complete. All that is true. We just have to find the right person who can give us perfect, unconditional love, complete us, fulfill us. And that person is your next wife, just a little younger. And that person is Jesus Christ. The Orthodox understanding of marriage is that Christ is the celebrant and the author of marriage. In fact, this wedding is the wedding of the spouses to Christ. As Sylvia mentioned, we don't face each other as bride and groom and make promises to each other. And you don't want to go with me to one of those wedding ceremonies. It's so bad and it's really hard, but I try not to say anything. But when they're reading what they promised to do to each other, I'm like, they're going to break that, they're going to break that, they're going to break that. I mean, it's horrible. It just happens to be true. Why? Well, my wife has discovered. She's discovered my fault. And she says things like, you are very selfish. And I, can't argue with that. That's a good point. You're more concerned about what you want than what I want. Oh, check. You really don't care, or you have a problem here. I'm like, check. I can't argue that. She's got a good point. You know what she's discovered? I make a terrible Jesus Christ. It's really hard for me to love unconditionally. It's really easy for me to love my wife when we agree on things. I'm an awesome husband. When she does what I want. I'm charming, I'm kind of witty. When I get my way, I'm fun to be with. But now, if you don't follow through on something you said you'd do, if you don't notice when I need help and you don't help me, if you say something that hurts me, if I feel abandoned or criticized by you, if I feel betrayed, you are not going to believe what my instinct is when I get hurt or feel betrayed. You guys probably aren't like this, but I can get angry. I can retaliate. I can attack back. I can justify it because you hurt me first. I can withdraw. I am not going close to you. I can put up a wall. I can call my sisters and tell them all the terrible things you just did. I can get people on my side to make me feel right and to blame you. No problem. What's really hard is to forgive. I have a hard time with that. What's really hard is to love someone who attacks. What's really hard is to respond with love and caring and maybe curiosity when we feel abandoned or betrayed. That's really hard. That just happens to be love. So what we see is that we're created that, and it's Christ in the midst of the wedding. So no matter what I promise to my wife on my wedding day, it'll all be true until those things happen, until we have conflict and differences and disagreements and struggles and hurts. Then everything I promised, I'm not even able to fulfill my promise. But there is someone who can fulfill his promise, who never fails to fulfill his promise. I know someone who, when he's mocked and betrayed and really hurt, responds with forgiveness, responds with a self-offering type of love. I only know one person who has that love. Marriage is a journey of me as a man accessing him as God and acquiring that love. Marriage is a journey of my wife as a woman accessing him and acquiring that type of love. In and through marriage, each person is wedded to Christ in and through their union with each other. I am married, then, means that I enslave my heart to Christ. I am the slave of Christ. I'm not the servant of Christ. Servants get paid. I am the slave of Christ. Whoa. Within this mystery of me accepting to be the slave of Christ, we find our fulfillment as husbands and wives, as we become one in Christ, as we become perfected in Christ, as we acquire that perfect Christ-like love. I want to take a minute to talk about what it means to be a slave to Christ. Because in our time, we live in a culture of rights, right? Human dignity. But if you ever hear, and slavery, for most of us, is a pretty foreign, distant concept. But if you reflect on slavery, what rights did slaves have? Are slaves entitled to their opinions? They're not entitled to thoughts. They're not entitled to opinions. They need to do whatever the master says, no matter what. They lose, in a sense, in a worldly sense, their humanity. They are not human beings. We would never tolerate that. And why wouldn't we tolerate that? Because how could I surrender to someone? They will use me, they will abuse me, they will take advantage of me. So instinctively we think that's wrong. Unless we're talking about being a slave to Christ. What if I told you that Christ will never abuse us, will never use us, or take advantage of us? And the process of surrendering everything to Christ will actually make us fully human. Will actually allow us to be free of our diseases. Will actually fulfill us in a way that we're actually longing for. Will actually complete us in the way that we deeply desire by becoming a slave to Him. And what makes it hard? Getting my way, getting my desires, serving myself, my self-centeredness. The Christian is the one who voluntarily, because Christ doesn't impose His authority over us. He invites us. If you desire to follow me, take up your cross and follow me. He invites us to be a slave to Him. Give up our way, give up our thoughts, follow Him. That is the heart of what it means to be a Christian. And marriage, that's the heart of this path of intimacy with our spouse. And in our wedding ceremony, we see that. Rather than facing each other, we're both facing forward, side by side. And in the dance of Isaiah, what we have is the couple, the bride and groom, will hold their hands together. The priest will take their hands and walk and lead them. The priest. Not some abstract idea of love or abstract idea of Christ, a person, a priest within the church. The body of Christ will take the couple and lead them. Far from arguing about who gets their way, they both surrender to the priest. And is he going wherever he wants? No, in our tradition, he's holding the gospel in his right arm. That he leads us in this way of Christ. And in this way of Christ, we are invited to encounter that longing, that love, and that person. And that is a real change. That's a real healing process. As a sacrament, marriage is sustained by the Holy Spirit. It is a vehicle of the Holy Spirit. Marriage is transfiguring. Marriage transfigures human love into a new reality of heavenly origin. Marriage is a divine gift of God that unites a man and woman in Christ and opens them up to the path toward divine life and perfection. That this path of following Christ, of growing in that perfect love, is the path of deification, the salvation of my soul and the salvation of Georgia's soul. It is a journey toward the kingdom of God. So far from meeting my needs and desires, trying to love Georgia reveals my neediness. Far from finding a spouse who can make me feel good enough, our spouse will force us to come face to face with those deep feelings I have that I am not good enough. Far from healing my loneliness, marriage, our spouse, will reveal our deep feelings of loneliness. That is the path. And it is what we do when we encounter this. When we encounter the hurts, the betrayals, the not getting our way, the differences, that becomes the invitation. It's when we encounter the sins of our spouse that we are invited to learn what love is. Marriage is a journey of love. The couple's gift of self to each other is to come to love in a divine way. The end result of this journey of marriage is that we, Philip, Georgia, each one of us as persons, come to love like Christ loves in a divine way. And so to paraphrase Galatians, it is no longer I who love, but Christ in me. That I acquire perfect love. That Georgia and I become perfected in love toward each other. And this perfection is not an outward perfection of a couple that never fights, but an essential inner transformation of the husband and the wife who participate through grace in God's divine nature. Because as St. John writes, if you ask him, God, he will work an even greater miracle than he worked in the wedding of Cana. That is, he will transform my selfishness, the water of my unstable passions, into the wine of spiritual unity. That my very self-centered, selfish nature becomes transformed into a spiritual unity. Yet, in my marriage, I still love my wife imperfectly. And more noticeably to me, she loves me imperfectly. Because we know that only the perfect person with a perfect conscience, a perfect mind, and perfect power can have perfect love. And that is God himself. Marriage is a journey of acquiring that. Marriage is my journey of acquiring perfect love that intersects with Georgia's. In fact, they're intertwined. For our marriages to thrive, for us to grow, is that we need to allow ourselves, our reactions, our desires, our sins to be healed in Christ, and allow our love to be transfigured into divine love by partaking of God's nature. This is a journey to heaven, which we can say is far from struggle-free, because the kingdom of God suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. We understand that this is a real struggle, Matthew 10:12. But the nature of the marriage struggle is not against each other as husbands and wives, but against our own sinfulness, our own self-centeredness, our own my way or the highway, our own really deep sense that I am right and he is wrong, or I am right and she is wrong. The struggle for the healing of our souls is up against that. It's not that there are struggles on the path of marriage, but struggles are the path of marriage. And those are specifically the struggle of me, the struggle of letting go, getting my way, the struggle of learning to forgive someone who hurts me. We live out this sacrament of marriage in the daily life, in our daily lives, as we live out our vocation to love our spouse as unto the Lord. Love her not so much for her sake, but for Christ's sake. This is why St. Paul says, be subject as unto the Lord. Within the sacrament of marriage, our love for God is expressed by the way we love our spouse. And our love of our spouse reveals our love for God. When Christ was asked, what is the greatest of all the commandments? Remember his answer? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. At the heart of marriage is that twofold commandment. How can you say you love God who you can't see if you can't even talk to your spouse who you can see? Marriage is about keeping those two things intimately connected. Because if we lose the love of God in our marriage, it's just two strong-minded people fighting to get their way who will ultimately disappoint. And if one of you tries to love selflessly, you end up in some unhealthy, codependent master-slave relationship where you do really lose yourself. That's really unhealthy. We need to recognize Christ in the midst. But if you just love God and don't listen to your spouse, don't respect your spouse, don't take his or her needs seriously, his or her opinions seriously, allow him or her to influence you, but you say you love God, that's like some really unhealthy external religiosity, like we go to church, we do all these things, we really look nice when we're dressed up in church on Sunday. But in our homes, there's real pain and suffering. So for us, we need to keep those two things intimately tied together to understand the core of marriage. Yet most couples, when we ask why we get married, do not get married to be perfected in Christ, to be transformed. Most couples don't choose a partner to learn perfect love or save their souls. A lot of couples, as we mentioned, get married for different reasons. So as an Orthodox therapist, I'm in the business of helping couples who got married for the wrong reason to stay married for the right reason, to reflect on what this path of marriage is. And we can understand, with this understanding, why we get stuck in our marriages. We get stuck because my ability to love my wife is really limited. And her ability to love me is really limited. What happens in marriage is my needs and desires are not going to be met by my wife. And her needs and desires are not going to be met by me. And if we try that, there's inevitably a huge chasm between us, no matter how hard we try. And what happens to us when we encounter this reality that my spouse will not ever meet that need? When we encounter that chasm? Well, we recognize that when we come to that deep loneliness or that spot, we find Christ. We find peace. We look for peace because Christ is in the midst of us. We learn, what does that mean to find Christ in that spot? It means learning to pray. It means learning to confess, to share with a spiritual father. It means allowing yourself to be known. It means shifting your focus from blaming this person for not being Jesus Christ to take responsibility for how I am not acting like Jesus Christ. When we come to that abyss, we're invited to find Christ in that spot, because this is why he came into the world. He came into the world to bridge the chasm between male and female, to bridge that divide, to reunify. Remember in Genesis, God created male and female as separate to be united, but through the fall, that separation turned into gender wars. And there's an irreconcilable gap in the genders that Christ enters into. So spouses get locked in a cycle of mutual blame and judgment, with each one very aware of the faults and shortcomings of the other. Paul of Dokimov writes, actually this is St. John Chrysostom, when a husband and a wife are at odds with each other, their household is in no better shape than a storm-tossed ship in which the captain and the pilot disagree. This invitation to divine love is at the core of who we're called to become in and through learning to love the specific broken, needy, imperfect person that you're in a relationship with. And I know it's not fair. It's not right. It shouldn't be this way. You know, I try my hardest, but really? You're not giving back to me? And I'm reminded of the words of Christ on the cross. What is it that he said? I believe it was something like he looked down on the Jewish people and said, really? You've got to be kidding me. I did nothing wrong. I literally created you. You completely made up false stories against me. I am right. This is totally unacceptable, and I'm going to tell Father that you need to change. Now, he would be right if he said that. And you betrayed me. I was so nice to you. But he didn't look down at the faults of the Jewish people, of us. He looked up and he said, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. We find Christ in the abyss because Christ came to earth and walked our place and went to that abyss and offered his life to cross that. Now, I know that's a little bit abstract, a little bit theological, but it's really important to understand. There are a lot of cool strategies for marriage, there are a lot of cool tools like the 10-second answering a cell phone. And it's important to learn these things. There's good communication we can learn. There's stuff about our families we can learn. What we can't learn, but we need to believe, is to recognize that all the tools and skills and strategies to have a great marriage involve recognizing where the problem is, right here, and where the solution is, Christ, his church, and my inner transformation. And then all the skills are incredible. But like Sylvia nicely said, What are we tempted to do when we see these great skills? Well, solve the other problem. The problem is you, and if you just changed it. But the very instinct to apply the gospel to our spouse reveals my faith in some American marriage narrative and this worldly sense that the problem is my wife's fault or my spouse's fault. Because we want that love. But I love this quote by Paul Evdokimov. Love is not a psychological fact within the immediate reach of human nature. You can't try harder to love perfectly. It requires the mediation of grace. We need to be gifted with that love. We need to receive that love. We need to be changed. And when we do that, that love is directed towards our imperfect, mildly annoying, sometimes really difficult spouse. The impossible nature of this task in marriage, it's impossible to do this, reveals to us where we should focus. Matthew 19:26, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. So my response to my wife daily is not just the struggle to love her, but the struggle to love God. And when we encounter the differences, or when we get stuck, or when I get annoyed, or when she gets annoyed, we tend to react out of our immature selfishness. That becomes an invitation. I'm not even paying attention to what she does, because I know I will follow this orthodox win-win strategy for a successful marriage. I will seek Christ no matter what my spouse does. And I win because if she decides to seek Christ, we have this beautiful marriage. And I win because Christ, when we do this, we encounter a real fullness of life that even if she doesn't, this fullness of life in Christ is actually more magnificent than anything. To love is not to give in or to lose ourselves. It's not just giving up our way. Sometimes it requires speaking up, setting limits, saying no. That's okay, I can raise my voice. My wife says I'm really good at that.
No, you're not allowed.
Battery's out. We need to keep this divine orientation in marriage because we're called to say no to sin, addictions, domestic violence, unhealthy ways of communicating, to say no. Saying yes to Christ sometimes means saying no to our spouse. The key is to be guided by someone, not your own way. In those cases, in all cases, we face that invitation to turn towards Christ, who gives without getting, who showers us even when we don't deserve it. Because in marriage, we realize, gee, I'm giving everything and not getting anything, and that's really unfair. It's out of balance. When we focus on Christ, who gives everything freely, suddenly that love can be overflowing, not just to our spouse, but to our kids. Which is why I love that quote that you said, Sylvia, when she goes to Father. Are you coming here to complain, or are you coming here to confess? And in my opinion, Sylvia gave the perfect answer. Yes. Because we see this in marriage. We have to move from complaining to confessing. That's a movement. We're not supposed to be perfected now, but we are supposed to be serious about desiring that perfection. So the answer is yes. And the good pastor or the good Orthodox therapist will gently receive the complaints, feel the pain, and then invite a confession. This confession of self-offering. This, as I understand it, is God's plan for marriage. He's the architect of marriage. If you wanted to build a building, would you need to follow the architect's design for the building? Do you have to? I know some Greek contractors who may not look so closely at the designs. That doesn't matter. You don't have to follow an architect's design for a building. But if you want the building to be stable and to last a long time, you have to follow the design of the architect. Do you have to follow this design in marriage? Every time you have a conflict, look to reflect on where I need to heal. Take responsibility, forgive. No, you don't have to. The world kind of pumps up that self-centered nature of marriage. It's kind of what we do in high school. If you want a marriage to last, to be stable and last, I want to invite you to learn more about this design. And as you're learning things this weekend about tools and strategies, never look at your spouse. Try not to. Try to look at what I can take to change the way I treat my spouse. And as a guy, it's kind of annoying to have my wife looking at me like, that one's for you. It's annoying. Forgive her because she doesn't know what she's doing. Because each one of us is imperfect, and each one of us is tempted to say, try not to do that. Take 3 things from this day that you will change in yourself. Don't tell your spouse. Tell your spiritual father, and maybe tell your peers, your friends, that I realize that I need to change this. Don't tell her. It doesn't matter. Your kids will be able to tell. There's also someone else. If you don't tell anyone, there's also someone else who will know. But what do we care what God thinks? I mean, come on. Why do we care? It's in the nature of the Christian life to choose anonymity, to not say, look what I did. And God promises us, and I think He's good for His word, those things that are done in secret will be noted forever. And this is the case of marriage. Take time out, reflect, look at what I need to change in myself. And if you don't know, if you can't think of anything, consider the last 3 things your spouse has told you. And reflect on that. And figure, all right, how can I ask God for help? How can I deepen my intimacy with God? Because that is how we find fulfillment. You don't have to believe me. You can keep trying to blame your wife, blame your husband. You can keep trying to get your needs met from that person. I can just promise you struggle and misery. But if you choose this invitation to reflect and to take a step in faith, I can promise you struggle. It's hard. And transformation, peace, intimacy, fullness of life. So you can't avoid the struggle. One's a struggle toward misery, the other's a struggle towards peace, freedom, and joy. So God's plan for marriage is that we live happily ever after. Because you know, that Notebook, American Myth, Journey of Marriage, right? Don't we desire happily ever after? That is Christ's plan. That is God's plan for marriage. God does not give us marriage to endure and be miserable. He gives us marriage so that we may live happily ever after. But that happily ever after does not come from trying to change your spouse. Because most people enter into happily ever after thinking, I will get all my desires met, I just need to change my spouse in a few ways. God's plan for happily ever after is learning to love my spouse when I see the faults and allow God to change me in just a few little ways. So I'm going to end right here. I will take questions or comments. The beautiful thing of marriage is We're not going to solve everything today, but God invites us to take a step today. As we learn just a little bit, I welcome that. Thank you very much. Oh, all right. I forgot one thing. The last slide. So when we think about the icon of marriage, the most powerful icon of marriage, and I wanted this up for the last, is the icon of the resurrection. Christ descending into Hades to get Adam and Eve. Christ came into the world to conquer death and to free us from those bonds of death. And so in this icon, he's descending and raising up Adam and Eve. Two questions. Number one, are Adam and Eve connected in this icon? Are they connected to each other? Yes, through Christ. That is intimacy in marriage. Is the connection through Christ in perfect love. And number two, if you notice, I don't know if you can see it, how Christ is holding Adam and Eve. Christ is grabbing Adam and Eve by the wrist. They're not holding hands. You know what that indicates or symbolizes or reveals or communicates? If we're being grabbed by our wrist and lifted up, that we're not really offering anything. It's all Christ who literally pulls Georgia and I up from our self-centered ways, from these nasty habits that we inherited from our families, from our my way or the highway mentality, from our need to be right more than our desire to grow in love. And Christ just pulls us up. This is an icon of God's plan for marriage. Now I'll try and land this airplane and say thank you very much. Because I still have to call my wife back and find out how the football game ended.
Thank you, Dr. Mamalakis. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask in person? You can also send them anonymously. What do you guys think? We have an extra mic. We have him here with us. But feel free to also send in your questions, and we will take them as we go. You know, Dr. Mamalakis, I popped in my mind a line in your book, and if we can all live this way, let's always begin with the end in mind. And what is that goal? It's the kingdom, right? So imagine if we led our marriages this way. So begin with the end in mind. Thank you so much, Dr. Mamalakis. I love that you took the call from your wife. I think all wives here noted that.
So I had a wife of a student of mine I just was at a conference with. And she said, since you taught my husband that, this was like 15 years ago, he always takes my, he's a full-time parish priest. He always takes my calls, and they're about, you know, if he's in a meeting, it's just a little quick. And nowadays with texting, it's even easier to quickly text. So there are a lot of things about this path. We can't love perfectly, but we can take responsibility, and we can repent, and we can forgive. And the more we realize this path, the more we can have mercy on our spouse. You know, she's learning, she's growing, she's not supposed to be perfect. And forgive them for not meeting our needs. Like the antidote to the American myth is actually forgiveness. Is forgive your spouse for not being the type of person that you long for. And once you release your partner from meeting that need, it takes away a lot of the tension of the marriage. It takes away a lot of the tension in our hearts. Just on now, it makes we get to figure out what to do with our needs. But then it frees us up to pray for our spouse, to care for it, to attend. And I love the video of all the little kids who said, remember, some of the things they said was they speak to me nicely. They do hard things. They wipe the poop off my foot, off my shoe. Love is what we do in that struggle. They do things that they know I like. They drive me to soccer or whatever he said. They use kind words. They say, I love you. When we release our spouse from meeting our needs, it frees us up to do that. Say nice things, do things we know our spouse likes, assist, stay in the conversation even when there's poop on our shoes, you know, the uncomfortable things. So you're going to have to stop me from talking.
No, we want to hear more from you. Do you guys have any questions or anything you'd like to comment on or share? Okay, so we can take a 5-minute break, but like a 5-minute real-time break, not 5 minutes of Egyptian time. The servants will be out there timekeeping, so we could take a 5-minute break before we have our next talk. Nice little stretch. See you in 5. Let's give another round of applause.
Thanks, I'm glad you liked it. I told her 11, at 10:58 she called. That's pretty precise.
I don't want to share it now. Okay.
Sure.
For your workshop,
Oh, okay.
Dr. Haney did a video, but he spoke to only men. So I have both of this PDFs, both of the slides up for you, the instructions, the questions, but right before it,
Do the video at the beginning.
it's up to you. But the video is nice. We have to use it.
You watched it?
Yes, I watched it, and Kishoy and I. download it to iMovie and just add a soundtrack. Yes. But I couldn't, yes. Okay, guys, we're ready to start.
Are outside. Any of the 3 young women outside can give you the tickets. You can either pay by cash or Venmo. If you've already Venmoed and you have not received your tickets yet, please see me and I will get them to you. We will be pulling the winning ticket maybe halfway in between, maybe after another the breakout session, and you will be receiving a check for half of the proceeds. The other half will go towards the Archdiocese. If you guys have any questions, you can see me, Sylvia, Sherry, Caroline, or anybody in the back, basically. Okay?
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, I apologize. I see a ton of questions here. I didn't realize I had to scan the code too to open your questions. But if you like the questions that are already up, make sure you hit that like button, the thumbs up, because then the question moves up and we will definitely get to it, because I see we have a ton of questions, so we will get to it. I have the honor of introducing one of my very good friends who I am always blessed to serve with. He came to us all the way from California. I think he's been in New Jersey every single weekend of October, and nothing ever is at the same time, so he came especially for us last night. Makar Nagib is the lead coach and associate marriage and family therapist. He serves couples and individuals across the globe. He has been working with these groups for over 15 years. He delivers more than 75 lectures every year. His work is focused on supporting healthy conflict management, forgiveness, sexual intimacy, and spirituality. Makar earned a Master's of Arts degree in Marriage and Family Therapy from Alliance Graduate School in Counseling, Nyack College here in New York, and a Master's in Business Administration from Simon Business School, University of Rochester. He's registered as an associate marriage and family therapist in the state of California. Please give a very warm welcome to Makar.
All right, hi guys. So happy to be among you. I love all of you so much, and I am really feel very strongly about every one of you having an awesome marriage. I feel very strongly about that. And I can tell you that a good marriage is something that is a wonderful feeling. There is nothing like being in a good marriage, right? But to have a good marriage takes a ton of work, a whole ton of work. It's really hard work. Also, to have a bad marriage, all you have to do is nothing, okay? To have a bad marriage, just do nothing, right? And you will have a bad marriage, okay? So, what I want to talk about today with God's grace is the Healthy Marriage Toolkit. Do you want to do this? Not now. We're just okay. All right. So, what is a toolkit? What is a toolkit? And I encourage you, by the way, as we're going through this, to send in your questions, and God willing, we'll have time to talk about them. What is a toolkit? A toolkit, according to the Collins English Dictionary, is a set of tools designed to be used together or for a particular purpose. Okay, it's a set of tools. So it's a group of things that you have together, and they're designed to be used together or for a particular purpose. About the toolkit that we'll discuss today. In marriage, many things belong to the both of you, right? We say the two become one. It's no longer mine, it's ours. But this toolkit that we're going to talk about is belonging to you personally and specifically. It's yours and as an individual. And you may already have some of these tools, but they might be stronger or weaker than some of the ones that your spouse has. So, but you have to focus on your toolkit. All the tools in your toolkit are available to you, even if your spouse isn't using their tools. I just want to tell you, when I got married, my wife actually, we both lived on our own before we got married, and then when we got married, we brought all of our belongings under one roof, and she had a toolbox. Right? It was a pink toolbox. It had pink accents, but she had her hammer, the screwdriver, and all this stuff. And I had my toolbox. It was black with the yellow accents and stuff. And I had my toolbox, right? And we had our different set of tools. If one of our toolkits wasn't available, the other one can still use their tools. Okay? Just imagine having two toolboxes. The work doesn't stop when one toolbox is missing or incomplete. So with God's grace, we're going to talk about 6 core tools for your toolkit. And we're going to break them up into 2 categories. The first category of 3 tools is how I think. How I think. And the second category is what I do. So the first 3 tools we're going to talk about are mainly things that affect what is going on in your mind as you're doing this whole marriage thing, okay? And the second set is what I do. The first 3 tools are a saw, a jackhammer, and a paint roller, okay? And this seems a little corny, but I promise you, every single tool here is chosen on purpose for a reason, okay? And we're going to go through that. So, the first tool is going to be my experience does not equal my spouse's experience. My experience does not equal my spouse's experience. And we're going to go through all of these at some point in a few moments. The second tool is I am contributing to the challenge. Ooh, that one's don't want to. No, I don't even agree with that. I do agree with that when I wrote it. So, but I am contributing to the challenge in my marriage. Ugh. The third one is my spouse is good and is my teammate. The next 3 set of tools in the what I do bucket is a hammer, a flashlight, and a ruler. Number 4 is invest in yourself. This is something we need to do. The flashlight is help your spouse flourish, and the ruler is pray with the right mindset. And I promise you that's not there because every Christian setting we have to say pray. It's there for a very specific reason, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these things. We're going to say, why did we choose this tool? And then we're going to talk about some details about it. And for every tool, we're going to have steps that we should take to use the tool, okay? All right, so let's get started. The first one is the saw. My experience does not equal my spouse's experience. And this is in the category of how I think. Okay, this happens in your mind. Why are we using a saw? Because you need to split your perspective of there being one experience into two. You have to have two perspectives as you're working through marriage. Think of two perspectives. Split your one perspective into two. No matter how powerful your feelings are, my brothers and sisters, no matter how obvious or clear your perspective is to you, undeniable. You can't argue against it. There is another one that is equally valid. You sure? As equally valid as my own opinion too? Yes, it's equally valid, equally important, right? At least 95% of the time, this is from experience. Not experience in my own marriage, I'm talking about experience as a professional working with couples, right? If you are hurt and offended, so is your spouse. If you are scared, so is your spouse. If you feel like your needs are not being considered, your spouse feels the same way. I very often talk with couples, and one of them says, she doesn't care about what I think, or he doesn't care about my needs. And I let them talk, and I do the empathy thing, and we keep going, and then the other person says, but she doesn't care about my needs either. Don't you remember when this and this and this happened, right? I have never met a spouse that wants a bad marriage. I'm going to probably say this again. There is no spouse that wakes up and says, how am I going to destroy my marriage today? No spouse does that, right? Every spouse wants a good marriage and wants the pain to stop. So, how should we embrace two perspectives? Remember, this is all in your mind, okay? Your mind is a very, very powerful tool. First is, say to yourself, my spouse has a different point of view about what's happening, and my spouse is trying to protect themselves from hurt. If you say that statement, that's immediately going to start to shift your posture towards your spouse. My spouse has a different point of view about what's happening and is probably trying to protect themselves from hurt. Before demanding that your spouse understand your perspective or asserting your own perspective, ask about theirs. The next 3 steps can save you maybe 7 therapy sessions. I am not kidding. This is so important, okay? Because a lot of times what we're doing is we're sitting down as a third party and guiding the couple to do what I'm about to show you. If you just do it yourself, this is going to save you a lot of trouble. These are the money steps right here, okay? Just pay attention. So, but before demanding that they understand your perspective, just calmly say, I think we have 2 different points of view. Duh, right? Can you explain, don't say the duh part, just say that to yourself. So, can you explain yours to me, and then I'll explain mine to you? Just say that, right? Right, the door is starting to open with that statement. There's a big door opening when you say that statement. Then when your spouse tells you their point of view, play back what you're hearing. Just say it back. Like it sounds like what you're saying is X, Y, and Z. Next powerful thing to say. Do you feel like I understand what you've explained to me? Wow! If somebody asks you, hey, this is what I'm hearing you say, do you feel like I understand? Why are we fighting as a couple? We're fighting to be understood. We're fighting to be heard. So when you tell your spouse, do you feel like I understand you? And you give your spouse the chance to actually answer that question, and you're ready to receive the answer, That is a major, major, major shift in working through disagreements. There's still one more step. There's three of them, these last three, okay? Then say, is there anything else that you'd like me to understand? Just kind of follow up with that question. And, like, ask the question in a different way. If you do this, you will be embracing two perspectives in the marriage. You will do the work needed to do this. And remember, try as much as you can to do this before you demand that you be understood or before you assert your perspective. Everyone with me so far? All right, good. All right, I'm seeing some nods. All right, number 2, the jackhammer. Does everybody know what a jackhammer is? Yeah, it's that thing that goes, right? And it's something you see on the street. I remember in the church that I grew up in many, many years ago, we wanted to excavate the basement of our church. And as Dr. Ramalakis was saying, we didn't really have an architect actually, we just were excavating a basement. And also we didn't pay for any labor, we used Sunday school kids. I was one of them. So at the ripe age of 14 years old, I learned how to use, construction machinery, including a jackhammer, right? So I have a very intimate relationship or experience with this. So, but why are we using a jackhammer? Why are we using a jackhammer? Because the most powerful tool in your toolkit is to be used to address the most powerful obstacle in marital conflict. This is the most powerful tool in your toolkit because it's used to address the most powerful obstacle in marital conflict. Every conflict, no exceptions, 100.00% of the time this applies. Every conflict has at least 2 people contributing to it. If you fail to see your contribution to the challenges in your marriage, you will never fully resolve them. They will always come back in some form. They will always come back in some form. And it's often hard to see that you're contributing to your own problems, but I want to give you some examples. I'm going to put up a table right now. The text is kind of small, but I was also hoping when the materials are shared, you could read through these on your own, but I'm going to read them right now. And what I'm showing you on this table is 4 scenarios where this is the scenario, and there's like an obvious contribution. Of course, this is the problem. But then there is a less obvious contribution. And that's the part that I want to focus on. That there's always 2 people contributing to the conflict. The first scenario, we're going to go through these a little quickly. The wife makes a criticism of the husband, so the husband withdraws emotionally and physically. What's the obvious contribution? Well, obviously, the wife is critical. Why doesn't the wife just stop being critical? But there's a less obvious contribution, which is that the husband's withdrawal feels like a punishment to the wife. And it leads her to pursue his attention more and often by becoming even more critical and saying, where are you emotionally? You're neglecting me, what, and this and that. 2 people are contributing to this, and usually these conflicts are vicious cycles, okay? Next scenario, the husband says emotionally abusive things to the wife, and this has been going on for years. What's the obvious contribution? That the husband is saying abusive things to the wife. Well, stop saying abusive things to the wife. You would say, so easy, right? No, there's also more to it. The wife's contribution is that she's failed to establish healthy boundaries and reasonable consequences for unhealthy behavior. That's part of the problem. Happens once, happens twice. After a while, something needs to change, right? And when we're responsible to set our own boundaries, no one's going to set them for us. I am not, by the way, just to be very clear, ever taking away 100% accountability from the person who is the abuser. I'm not taking that away. They are 100% accountable. But I'm also adding something on top of that. That if you are dealing with bad treatment, you have to take care of yourself and set some boundaries, right? Third scenario, the husband continues to resist regular church attendance and prayer at home, and both partners fight almost daily about spiritual practices and the children's spiritual development. The obvious contribution is the husband is resistant. What's wrong with this guy? I thought I married a Christian. What's X, Y, and Z, right? The less obvious contribution, which is actually, by the way, this is a very common conflict, is that the wife has framed spirituality as a source of tension for the entire family and has failed to create other ways to invest in the children's spirituality. Lots of times what's happening is we're fighting over spirituality. Why are we fighting over getting closer to God? We're doing ungodly things to get closer to God. Very common thing, you're trying to go to church Sunday morning, one person is waking up late, the other person this, you get into a huge fight, but you get to church late, by the time you're there, you are in no spiritual position to receive anything from church. By the time you get to church on Sunday morning, because of all the fighting that's happened, right? This is a very common thing. Another last scenario is the wife is usually not in the mood to be sexually intimate with husband, and the husband is angry. The wife does not want to be intimate, seems like the obvious contribution. But the less obvious contribution is that the husband has failed to see that sexual intimacy is deeply connected with other kinds of intimacy in marriage, emotional, spiritual, etc., and has become demanding rather than empathetic. So I hope by now with these examples, you can see that we are all contributing to the problems in our marriage, if there are problems, which for just about every single one of us, there are problems, I promise you. So I want to tell you, this question of like, why is it important that both spouses acknowledge their contribution? Like, why is that a necessary factor? Why is that important? Well, one is that not seeing your contribution keeps you in the victim position versus putting you in a position of empowerment and healthy control. If all you're saying about your problems in your marriage is that, well, they this and they that and he this and she that and da, you're a victim. You're just a victim. That's how you're seeing your problem. You are not in control when you're seeing yourself as a victim. You have no power when you're seeing yourself as a victim. So this is one of the reasons why to resolve an issue fully, you need to see both contributions. Also, if you don't know your contribution, you can't prevent it from happening again. Also, your spouse cannot fully reconcile with you. If it's clear that you don't know how to prevent your contribution from recurring, and it's also, by the way, not impossible, but much harder for your spouse to forgive you if you're not apologetic. It's hard. So if you don't see your contribution, you're never going to apologize. And that makes it much harder for your spouse to offer forgiveness. So, how to identify and address your contribution to tension? First of all, identify the negative pattern in the relationship. Usually, like the vast majority of the time, if there's a conflict, it happens again and again and again. Okay? And you need to identify that pattern. Then identify what you do in that pattern. Almost imagine like there's a table and there's like husband and wife and whichever one you are, okay? And then just say, okay, the pattern is, wife says this, then husband does that, then wife does this, and then husband does that, and wife does, and then just look at your column. What is all the stuff that I do, right? Ask yourself when you look at that column, if I stop doing what I usually do in that pattern, what will happen? What will happen if I just stop at any point in my role? What could I do instead of what I usually do? And then repeat these questions until you come up with something more constructive, where you can change your contribution. When you change your contribution in that pattern, the whole pattern will be turned over on its head. It'll just break apart. It'll lose its power. A credible person may also be able to help if you're having a hard time doing this. By the way, I'm going to say the phrase credible person a few times. Credible person is one of three things. Someone with knowledge, someone with really good experience, or someone whose life you want to emulate. That's what makes, any of these things will make a credible person. Someone who has actual knowledge about what you should do, or someone who has a lot of experience, right? Like you don't have to be trained in marriage and family therapy to be helpful, right? But there is only certain help that people with that expertise can offer. But these aren't the only people that can be supportive to you, by the way. So someone who has experience or someone who is living the life that you want to live, right? All right. And then lastly, meet with your spouse at a time when the tension is very low and apologize for your contribution. I didn't say this before because I wanted to save it for the end. Do you know what it means, what one implication is of the fact that there's two people contributing to a conflict? That both people have something to apologize for. Always. Always. It could be as simple as, I didn't consider your opinion. Or it could be that I raised my voice. Or it could be that I said hurtful things. Or it could be many other things. It could be much worse, of course, right? So that's one of the implications. And you know what? You know who should start with the apologizing? You. Apologize. Just apologize. There's always something that you can apologize for. And when you apologize first, like the chances of that conversation going well increase dramatically, okay? All right, is everybody with me so far? Some of them are going to get quicker. This is the hardest one, right? Okay. Number 3, the paint roller. My spouse is good and is my teammate. Is my teammate. Why a paint roller? Because when we're offended, our emotions drive us to paint an incomplete and bad picture of our spouse. We need to paint a more accurate picture. We need to paint a more accurate picture of our spouse. It is not an exaggeration to say that we can see our spouse as a manipulative and evil monster sometimes. When you're hurt, you can see your spouse as this person is a horrible person, a bad person, right? When you're in that moment of pain and you're offended. If you fail to balance negative, although valid, thoughts about your spouse with the positive truths about your spouse, you will lose access to happiness in marriage. You can't even touch it if you cannot balance the negative thoughts with positive thoughts. By the way, I just want to be super duper clear. I am not saying that your spouse is perfect, or I'm not saying that the bad things that you're seeing happening are not true. Your negative thoughts probably have a lot of validity, but they need to be balanced with the positive truths about your spouse. We need to paint a more accurate picture. I didn't say paint a positive picture. Paint an accurate picture, a full picture, a complete picture, a whole picture of what's going on in your marriage. And I want to give you some examples of some common emotionally driven negative and incomplete thoughts and how to repaint the image of your spouse. Another table with small text that you'll have access to read carefully later. But I just wanted to put these things up, okay? What I'm going to show you is what the emotionally driven thought is, and then how you can repaint, what an example is of repainting that image. This is very important. The first emotionally driven negative and incomplete thought is, my husband wants to control me. My husband wants to control me. Do you know what an example of a more accurately repainted image of your spouse is? It could be that he is insecure in my love for him and afraid that he'll lose me if I become more independent. That could be what's really going on. Insecurity and fear, not a desire to control. Another emotionally driven thought, every time she sees me being happy, she interrupts and destroys my happiness. Every time. I've heard, these are real things, by the way. These are not, I didn't come up with these, I didn't create them. These are real examples. The more accurately repainted image could be that she feels burnt out, neglected, and unfulfilled in her life and needs care for herself. Another example, he always chooses his family over me. He doesn't prioritize me or love me as much as he loves his family. What could really be happening is that he's never really had healthy boundaries with his parents. It's hard for him to bond more to me because he doesn't feel safe with me or trust me due to the conflict in our relationship. We think like, oh, well, look, he's so with his family, he's always there, but actually he doesn't feel safe with you because of all the conflict. Last one is whenever we agree on how we'll manage our money, she doesn't follow through on what we agreed to do and continues to spend irresponsibly. She is an immature child and doesn't care about our family. What could be happening is that she's using money to compensate for an emotional insecurity, feels ashamed about our financial situation, and has never really bought into our agreements. You know how you think you agreed on something and you didn't? Yeah, like you just told them what to do, and you think that was an agreement, right? So, is everybody seeing this, like what I'm trying to communicate to you? That our emotions can drive us to have one point of view, but if we do the effort to paint a more complete picture, there could be a lot more going on, right? When you think of the more complete picture, my beloved brothers and sisters, don't you feel like you can have more compassion towards your spouse when you're hearing that it's not about control, it's about insecurity and fear? That really can change your heart towards your spouse. How do you paint a more accurate picture of your spouse? I'm going to give you a few steps. Number one, as I said before, acknowledge the unhealthy behaviors in your spouse. Again, my goal here is not to say that you are wrong for identifying wrong things. No. If there's something wrong, we acknowledge it. But which category is this in? It's in the how do I think category. I'm not saying you necessarily go to your spouse and tell them, hey, you're wrong, you're messed up, right? First, do this in your mind. Then identify and reject any labels and assumptions about your spouse and their intentions. Reject thoughts like, he is selfish, she is greedy, she is, worried about her image, right? He wants to control me, right? These labels and assumptions, you have no idea, I have no idea what the intentions of someone is, regardless of what their behaviors might look like on the outside. We don't know what's in their heart. So we cannot say that the person is selfish. We can say that I feel like they're being selfish. It seems like that's a selfish thing, but I don't know what their intentions are, right? But you cannot say that they are selfish. Say to yourself these two statements. My spouse is a good person and wants good things, even if he or she doesn't know how to make good things happen. Just say that statement to yourself. And then say, and this is really important, we both brought character flaws and misconceptions into the marriage. I brought character flaws and misconceptions into my marriage. And we all do. We all bring these things. We come with stuff and we put it in the box, right? Bad stuff. We all do. No exceptions. How can I support my spouse while protecting myself? And lastly, I just want to tell you, if your negative thoughts have persisted for more than 3 weeks, please speak with a credible person about them, knowledge, experience, or life that you want to emulate. All right, so now we're going to switch into the next category, which is what to do. What to do. And here we're going to use, for number 4, which is invest in yourself, a hammer, okay? Why a hammer? You are being pulled, and me too, in so many directions, and will lose touch with who you are and where your life is headed. So you need to nail down the direction of your life. You need to nail it down. Kids, work, service, friends, family, maybe exercise, maybe studying, maybe some issue that's going on. We are busy. Right? We're swamped. I was joking with another group that, like when you're making small talk with someone and they're like, hey, how you doing? Very, very common answer is, doing well, man, just so busy. So busy, right? And I do that all the time. After years of doing that, I started to catch myself. Like, why am I saying I'm so busy all the time? Like we're all busy. It's like, is that a surprise to anyone, right? That I'm busy? We're busy, you're busy, we're all busy, right? And also, is that the only thing that's going on in my life? Is that the best answer I had available to me? There's so much good happening. Why did I choose busy to say? Like, as if what, now we're going to start to go through the list in this small talk conversation? We're not. Is that person going to help me? Probably not, right? Am I looking for help? No. So I started to catch myself, and now I'm just saying I'm doing well. A lot of good things going on, and that's true. That's true. So, but the reality is we are all busy, and as this busyness is happening, we're losing touch with ourselves. And so that's why we need to nail down the direction of your life. We can't be in this reactive mode on our back foot all the time in life. Marriage, parenting, work, friends, extended family, finances, service. When is there time for you? If you do not invest in yourself as an individual, you will become bitter, resentful, less resilient to normal stressors, and ultimately less effective as a person. I remember about a month ago, I had like a few talks back to back, and then someone asked me to give a talk, and then I said yes, and then I found myself, as I was preparing, I was getting really bitter. I was tired. I was like, this never ends. What am I doing? I don't want to serve. I don't want to. I don't want to do it. I want this to be over with, right? I can't wait till it's done. And I found myself, because I wasn't taking care of myself, becoming bitter about something that is very good, right? And that applies to marriage too. You want to be as effective as you can be. So I want to give you the invest in yourself conversation. This is something that you're going to do on your own, okay? First, get a good night's sleep. Get a good night's sleep. Like, however many hours you need, please, probably not 5, probably more than that, right? Get a good night's sleep. The next morning, schedule 2 hours to sit with yourself the next day with a pen and paper or a computer, but make sure all the notifications are off, okay? And then pray for God to be with you and guide you in the exercise I'm going to show you, okay? So you got to do these things, okay? You have to block the 2 hours. You have to get a good night's sleep. And then before you start, say a prayer and ask God to guide you in this exercise. And then create a table. I'm going to show you the example of a table. But create a table with the following items in the leftmost column. This is my right, but your left, right? Leftmost column. And in any order, but just write these things. Spiritually, physically, emotionally, intellectually, relationally, professionally, and financially, right? This is going to be made available to you, okay? But write all those things. These are the different aspects of who you are as a person. This is just going to take you 2 hours, but it makes a big difference. Then create 3 more columns. Say, how am I doing? First column. Next column, what could be better? And then the last column, what will I do differently in the next 2 weeks to make things better? Fill out the table, and then do the things in the last column and review it again in 2 to 3 weeks. This is an example of the table. It's just those things on the left. And then the how am I doing, what could be better, what will I do differently in the next 2 weeks to make things better. Okay? This is something you need to do. No one is going to do the investment that you can make in yourself. No one could do it for you. But the next tool is the flashlight, number 5, which is to help your spouse flourish. Help your spouse flourish. Why a flashlight? Why a flashlight? To help your spouse flourish, you need to search carefully for something that may not be easy to see. You may need to search carefully for something that may not be easy to see. What your spouse needs to flourish, to live up to their fullest potential in Christ, that's what I mean by flourish, like living up to your fullest potential and growing and thriving, may be very different from what you need. And if your spouse is not flourishing, it's heartbreaking to say that they're probably slowly languishing. Languishing means like wasting away. Can you imagine, my beloved brothers and sisters, that the person you committed to spending the rest of your life with, that you committed to loving more than anyone else, any other human being, that they are wasting away before your very eyes? That is so heartbreaking that could be happening to this person that I am wed to, that I'm united with. And I want to say that statement again. If they're not flourishing, they're probably slowly languishing. And I want to show you some signs of flourishing or languishing. Probably the last table. When someone is flourishing, there's a comfortable pace of change and improvement, with things getting completed before moving on to the next change. When that person is languishing, instead, there's little change in life over an extended period, or many change efforts starting but not completing. You know, there's many people who always have like the next idea, but when you look at their life, you're like, this person is in the dumps. Like they could keep coming up with more ideas. I don't think the next one's going to work. So they're slowly languishing, even though there might be many change efforts starting, but they're not completing. An example of flourishing is, on average, you would have more positively charged interactions, compliments, words of affirmation, optimism, a low fixation on regret. Someone who's languishing, on average, they have more negatively charged interactions, criticism, low motivation, pessimism, a sense of trying to survive over an extended period. And the last sign of flourishing is 3 or more healthy friendships with a balance of light and heavy discussions and frequent interaction. What I mean by light and heavy discussion is, actually, let me just say the languishing one, and then I'll give you the example. The languishing person has maybe 1 to 2 friendships, usually frequently, maybe talking like at a frequency of only how bad their problems get, right? They're mostly heavy discussions with less frequent interactions, or ones where the friends feel burdened. You guys, we all know this, right? Sometimes there are people who, they only talk to you when their life is in a lot of trouble, right? And you know, if you're talking to them, it's trouble. Not trouble for you, but it's going to be a heavy discussion. And you got to be ready for that. And sometimes you start to even feel it in your body, like, I'm not sure if I could do this right now, right? But then you have friends where there's a healthy balance. It's a healthy friendship. There's light, casual, spontaneous discussion, but there is also the discussion where you support each other, right? And it is a heavy discussion. So the person who's flourishing is going to have a healthy balance of both in their relationships, and they're going to be more frequent discussions. The one who's languishing is going to have mostly these heavy discussions. Of course, like drugs and some mental illness can affect how that works, but that's putting those things aside. How do you help your spouse flourish? Number 1 is be encouraging. Just be encouraging. By the way, I think any of us who are parents, we know how to be intentional about encouraging, right? Even if you don't do it, even if you're just a critical parent, which is not a good thing to be. But at least you know what it should feel like and look like. You just say good things. Just say it. Do it, right? Just do it. Okay? And that includes lifting their spirits even when they're not feeling down. Right? Like, you don't have to be encouraging only when someone is feeling down. You can be encouraging when someone is feeling good. Actually, I encourage couples to do that when there isn't a lot of tension, because that's like a very easy setting. You get lots of return on investment when the relationship is doing well, right? That's why sometimes a couple comes into therapy and sometimes they can't even manage the conflict throughout the week between sessions. By the time they come into the session, we spend the first half just trying to fix what happened over that week so they could start talking to each other again, right? And then we go to start the work of the session. Right? But what we want to do, and then when you find them in a good place, you work really hard, you get lots of return on investment just by being encouraging when someone's spirits are already lifted, right? So that's one thing that you can do. Contribute positive energy, smile, compliment, hug, help, be present, and appreciate the person. I just wanted to say, actually, appreciate the person. Don't appreciate the person just because they're your spouse. Appreciate them as if like this person is an amazing person with or without me. They're a really cool, good person. They're awesome, right? And I happen to also be married to them. That's how I want you to think about your spouse. Your spouse is an awesome person. They're amazing. And you also married them, right? And they're, God willing, if not already, going to be an amazing spouse. But you have to appreciate them in their essence, in who they are. In other terms, the image of God is in them, right? They're so deep. There's so much going on. They've already achieved so much. Maybe they're not at a certain level that you hope they were at, but you don't know what they had to start from. You don't know what their circumstances were. And maybe where they are right now is a very heroic and amazing place to be. And you have to appreciate them, independent of you. By the way, that's how Christ is with all of us. He appreciates us and loves us regardless of how we treat him, right? Support your spouse's interests. If you don't know what they are, ask them or help them explore different interests. You don't necessarily have to participate in all their interests, but support them appropriately, right? And sometimes couples get into this argument like, I'm letting him or her do what they're interested in doing and all this stuff, but I'm not getting, what I want. Disconnect these two things. Let them doing what they want is not the same as you not getting what you need, right? Or what you want. Focus on asking for what you need. Don't focus on stop doing that thing that you want to do. Forget that. Focus on communicating your need. Spend one-on-one quality time with your spouse very regularly. And when you're together, focus on your spouse, avoid distractions. And what I'm about to say, I'm going to say slowly. Slow down. When you're with your spouse, slow the discussion down. You don't have to be in this fast back and forth, talking about the kids, talking about work, talking about the family. No, just chill. Just chill, right? Chill out. You're, like imagine you're having dinner with your spouse. Imagine you're on vacation for 10 days. How are you when you're on vacation? You're just chilling. You're just hanging out, just sitting down. Sit down with your spouse. Chill out, right? Slow the conversation down. Don't rush to speak. Be a great listener. Listen as if your life depended on it. Listen so carefully. And then ask yourself, did I hear what she just said? Did I hear what he just said? Do I understand it? And if I don't, can I ask a question to clarify my understanding? Be a great listener. We talk about listening so much, I'm not spending a lot of time on that. And seek to understand and learn more about them. Your spouse is a deep, deep, deep ocean. And you have barely, penetrated the surface. There's so much to learn about their life and who they are and why they are the way they are. There's someone very important to me, not my spouse, my spouse is very important to me too, but someone's very important to me that I was spending time recently with just because we had to get some stuff done. And she's an older woman, and she started to tell me just kind of happened to tell me some things about her early life. Just started to say them. And I was just like, wow, I had known this person for so many years, and I never knew all these details. I knew them for at least 20 years, and I never knew all these details about their early life. And when I learned about their early life, I felt closer to that person, right? And that's a very important thing. We need to learn more about our spouse. In all the above, pay close attention to what works best with your spouse. All right, last one, my brothers and sisters, is the ruler. I think this is called a set scale or something technically, but it's a ruler. And pray is to pray with the right mindset. Pray with the right mindset. I want to ask you, before we go into this, why do we pray? Why do we pray? Do you think that when you pray, God says, oh, thank you for telling me, bro. I didn't know that was happening. Thank you. Now I know. Now I know. You think that that's what God says when you pray? You think God says, oh, okay, I didn't really think that was a big deal, but okay, I guess it's a big deal. Okay, thanks. Thanks for advising me. Thanks for teaching me something. Do you think that you are teaching God anything when you pray? Do you think that God is changing? God doesn't change. Do you think he's learning something? He doesn't need to learn anything. He knows everything. So why do we pray? I pray so that I change. I pray so that I change. Approach my prayer with an openness to change in my own heart. I need it. God does not need my prayer. He has much better creatures and humans praying to him than me, right? He doesn't need it. It's for me. Why a ruler? When you pray correctly, it puts your heart in the proper posture for God to do his miraculous work. Prayer gives you an accurate measurement of where you stand. Prayer gives you an accurate measurement of where you stand. Prayer should humble you, give you compassion toward your spouse, and give you comfort in God's care for you. And at the end of this, I want to show you how to do a complete prayer for your marriage. That's going to be coming up. But prayer should give you compassion and humble you. If we approach God simply so that he can change our spouse, without openness to his work in our hearts, we will miss the point of prayer. I think you're already starting to see one of the key messages from the first and second lecture so far, that when we leave here, most of the work that needs to be done in marriage happens in my heart. Let me just say that again. Most of the work that needs to be done in marriage has to be done in my heart. I'm not saying your spouse is perfect. I'm not saying there aren't things that need to be learned and improved. But I'm saying that the majority of the work is in my heart. So, what is the complete prayer for your marriage? First is, and this is something you're doing in prayer, okay? Ask God to help you see your flaws and your contribution to the challenges in your marriage. Admit your sins and mistakes to God. Already by the time you get to number 2, a lot of changes are happening, right? Because how do we usually pray when we're frustrated with our spouse, right? We're going into prayer with guns blazing, we're ready to bulldoze through everything. We're going to blame God too. We're going to blame everybody, right? Everybody, right? Admit your sins and mistakes to God. If there is an area in your heart that you know needs to change or a bad habit, admit this to God. Ask God to help your spouse thrive and grow in accordance with his will, not yours. When we're upset, ain't nobody wants to pray about their spouse flourishing, right? But do it. Do it. Ask, please God, help my spouse grow and flourish according to your will and not mine. Ask God to give you both the courage to make the changes that you need to make, and then tell God that you want to grow in your love for him. This is the complete prayer for your marriage. So, to summarize the Healthy Marriage Toolkit, we're just putting these all up here, is the first tool, which was a saw, is my experience does not equal my spouse's experience. Why this tool? Because you have to split your perspective of there being one experience into 2. The second one is the jackhammer, which is I am contributing to the challenge. And why a jackhammer? Because it's the most powerful tool for the most powerful obstacle in your marriage. The third tool is the paint roller. My spouse is good and is my teammate. And why this tool? Because we need to paint a more accurate picture of our spouse. The fourth tool is the hammer. Invest in yourself. Why a hammer? Because you need to nail down the direction of your life. The fifth tool is a flashlight. Help your spouse flourish. Why a flashlight? Because you have to search carefully for what will help your spouse flourish. And lastly, a ruler, which is pray with the right mindset. Why a ruler? Because when you pray correctly, God will give you an accurate measurement of where you stand. Glory be to God forever. Amen.
It's a big room, sorry. That was incredible. Can we give Makata another round of applause? I know everybody's texting me, asking me for the slides. You will get the entire presentation emailed to you when I figure out how to put such a large file up on a drive, that kind of techie stuff. But you will have access to this. We have a little time for questions before lunch. Can we ask Dr. Mamalakis and Makata a couple questions? Can you guys show of hands if you're okay with a couple minutes? Okay, all right, good. I have a question. Can I be all the tools at once? I think I've been every single one of them in the 20 years. So Kareem has the questions.
Okay, question number one. Since day one, my spouse doesn't tell me what I may be doing, saying that's bothersome, doesn't communicate feelings, thoughts, gets frustrated, and it builds till he explodes at me or in front of the kids.
What's the question?
Yeah, I'm not, it doesn't have a connection, but I think it's, how do you deal with that, and how do you change the behavior, I guess, to a better communication?
I'll try and be brief. Try is the operative word. First of all, thank you so much for that delightful presentation. And it occurs to me that when Sylvia sends the slides, we should watch it once every 6 months, right? Don't we need constant reminders of these things, ongoing
Absolutely.
process? So the question is, I feel like I'm running up against the wall. There's another person in that question, the person who asked the question, and what the question doesn't say is, what happens to you when you run into the wall? And my answer would be, figure out what happens to you when you run into what you're running into. Because, like we just heard, that's the place to start to find out what to do. Because we might think that a wall is a problem. And when we run into a wall, we might want to use that jackhammer on that wall, but he said, don't use the jackhammer on the wall. That just makes the wall bigger. I'm going to suggest that that is the path of marriage. And the invitation is what to do when you encounter a wall. I believe the wall is made out of ice. And the gentle light of Christ doesn't attack, but over time radiates and warms. But in order to do that, we need to find peace in front of that wall. So I use the image of an abyss. Find Christ, it's the same thing. When you encounter a wall, I'm not getting my needs met. There's something I'm not getting. You're like, all of us are like my little kids. They just put on a full-on assault. We want this right now. But for some reason, God invites us to find peace and to wait. And it's not a passive, angry, resentful, blaming wait. It's a seeking, peaceful, hopeful, faithful wait. Because what I have found in my marriage is when I encounter the walls, as I acquire peace, I change and I'm lifted up. The wall never goes away, but I ascend over the wall. There's a lot of things to do about recognizing, like you said, changing how we're describing it, but that's the invitation. Whoever wrote that, you want to find out, change the conversation to who you are and share that with someone.
I also want to encourage the person who's asking the question, the time to solve the problems is not during the conflict. So please, there's a lot of research, John Gottman did a lot of amazing research about what's happening to us during the conflict. During the conflict, no one's going to be influenced by anything, by anyone, right? So don't wait for the conflict to happen to try to do the work. Maybe you can do some really hard work to prepare, and then during a very calm time, you can say, hey, I want to make our marriage grow, and I want to hear you out, and be prepared to listen. Be prepared to listen with zero intention to defend or explain anything. Just make sure you become an expert in understanding or hearing what they're going to tell you, right? And then you can take that away and go figure out and get some help, right? Because we all need help a lot of times. But don't, the only thing that's happening in your marriage is not conflict. And sometimes because the conflict is so strong, we're withdrawing to avoid the conflict. So when we do get together, we're only having conflict because the other times I'm withdrawing, right? Which is a really, really horrible cycle.
Or getting agitated.
Yeah.
And what if this wasn't a problem to solve? What if it were a person to love? And how might that change what we choose to do when we encounter that? It's going to be like speed questions.
Okay, here's another one. How to forget something done by my spouse which has been forgiven but not forgotten.
That was not asked by a male, I'm just going to tell you. Because the men barely noticed it and certainly didn't remember it. And I say that in jest, but that's a particular burden for women. a particular burden. I can do 100 nice things for my wife, but she remembers in 1986. It's a burden.
Yeah, I would. Number one, it sounds, if that's the question that you're asking, I would suggest or encourage you to consider whether you've fully forgiven them. That's one thing to think about. Forgiveness does not mean you will forget, but it means that you will no longer hold it against them or expect anything in return. Okay, so it's that's a tough thing, right? So, and forgiveness is a lot of work. It's a full topic, but it's something that you probably should consider doing. It's not like working on. I think also if the mind is wonderful in its imperfections, right? So if you can get through the work of forgiveness, you might find that your mind will start to forget slowly, and if you focus more on the positive things that are going on. It's hard to forget the bad when we're already in an environment of bad, right? So if you can focus on improving the environment in your home, reducing the general conflict, adjusting your perspective towards your spouse, like Dr. Mamalakas is saying, as someone who is to be loved, who is imperfect, that can really make a big difference. But I just want to say the point that there's still some more forgiveness to do there, and that's important.
I want to echo what's really important, what forgiveness is. It's releasing that anger and resentment, the need to pay back. The hurt might remain. So if you have a painful memory, it's really appropriate to attend to the pain. The second thing is use that roller brush. Because oftentimes we narrow down our spouse to his worst mistakes. And that's not accurate. That might be true. But with the roller, no, there's more of a story. And the third thing that the church reveals to us, helps us forgive, is, where do we take responsibility? Which tool is looking at ourselves? The jackhammer. That if we start becoming more preoccupied with where I need to heal, and start recognizing how many things I've actually done to him, it actually softens our hearts to let that forgiveness enter in. Because remember that line in the Our Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who are in debt to us, who are indebted to us, who trespass against us. That God reveals to us that our capacity to be forgiven is intimately related to our capacity to let go of the anger and resentment towards someone. So the more we use the jackhammer, the more we are just preoccupied on what I need to do, the less you will recall and the less it'll matter what he did in 1986.
Okay, maybe one more.
This is kind of fun. Yeah. Can we do this over at lunch? I mean, this is good.
Yeah. One more, we'll go to lunch.
We just follow Sylvia. So now he's putting his own question in secretly.
Yeah,
good job. Brilliant.
So if you're saying Sylvia, what do you know?
He who has the microphone has the power.
Yeah, I found the one that I wrote. Here it is. What strategy do you recommend to help me always say something nice to my spouse? Sometimes it's hard to appreciate my spouse in a busy life.
Beautiful. I love that they're
I'll
thinking of a strategy.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I do is we know we're getting into these tough spots, and when we get all worked up and stuff, anything that comes out of our mouths is probably not good. And this goes for parenting as well as for your parents. And to have a script in place. Therapists will talk about self-talk or having a script where when I'm struggled, I'll say, I need a break or I need a timeout. Let's talk in 24 hours. With our kids, learning that. So I love the idea of coming up with something. If I can't find something good to say, number one, we don't say anything. And number two, like you mentioned, in the midst of it is not the best time. But to consider, my spouse really does try hard, and he does have, or she does have, a lot of good things. I just forget about them in the moment. And you can take time to think about, how can I remember that my wife does all these things, and my wife is a human being who's learning. And I want to allow that, just like God allows that in me, when we're calm, And it's legitimate to write things down. So in the heat of the moment, we make some ground rules. Say nothing. Wait 15 minutes before we say anything. Wait 24 hours. That kind of thing. That's great to think about strategies because it recognizes the limitations of our human nature.
Yeah, and also, I mean, sometimes we take for granted a lot of really good things that are happening already, right? Like, you know, I remember working with a couple. It was so sad to just watch them interact. You know, I'm saying, oh, like the wife says, you always do this, and we all, you know, we know when someone says you always, the person responds with the exception to the always, right? That's like the general pattern. So it says, you always do this, and then he says, no, but this time, but I did that and I did that, right? And then or sometimes, I'm going to tell you my point, but I just want to give another example, and then tell you the main point that ties them together. Sometimes one of the spouses is in trouble, and the other person did something to support them. In both of these situations, I say, well, did you thank them? And you know what? Sometimes I tell them in the session, can you thank your spouse right now? And you just watch, like, it's as if like ice is breaking, you know? They're just like, and sometimes they haven't thanked each other for the general things of life, doing the dishes, taking the kids to school, working, right? And they haven't thanked each other for those things. And sometimes they haven't done it in so long that when I ask them to thank each other, they sometimes can't even look each other in the eye. So sad, right? That you can't say, thank you, like, I really appreciate this, right? It's okay, you don't have to look each other in the eye. You could thank each other from different floors if you want to yell it and scream it. But
a text.
Yeah,
An appreciation text. It's really...
Yeah, so please, guys, there's so many things to thank your spouse for. That's one way of communicating positively. Also, any spouse, you could probably always compliment what they're wearing. You could probably always do that. Always, right? Unless you're a priest. I mean, your outfit's compliment. It says very nice cross. I love your choice of cross today. So, please, guys, become experts at finding good. Become experts at seeing good around you. That's how Christ was. He's found the good. He went to the Samaritan woman. Yes, you're right. You're right. What you said was right, that you're not married right now, right? And he said, hey, there's a jar right there. Can you get me some water? He found some way to empower her, right? Become an expert of seeing the good.
And not because he didn't know. He goes, oh, I know all your mistakes. It's as if it doesn't matter. And this is the temptation in marriage. It's the encouragement that you spoke about. If you cannot see the beauty in your spouse, that's actually not a problem with your spouse. That's a problem with your sight. Remind yourself in a quiet moment that Christ madly loves your spouse. And we have these images in the Orthodox Church where miraculous events where, like Christ at the transfiguration, he glowed. And we see miracle stories where all of a sudden you could see the light, that's brightness in our souls. We don't have the eyes of Christ. We can't see the beauty in our children or in our spouse. And that's not a problem with our children or our spouse. So people will tell me, oh, your kids are so great. And I say, all kids are great, just not all parents can see that. And the same in marriage, when we're hurt, when they're not meeting our needs, their faults all of a sudden come up in sharp relief. And their personhood gets lost. We need to recognize that is my problem. I need to go back to that hammer. I need to do that quiet prayer time because maybe I'm overwhelmed. Maybe I'm feeling all these things and I've lost my sight. We could keep talking.
We could keep talking, but I know we have lunch. We can actually shorten the lunch and do more of this. This is... what you guys are getting today is a huge blessing, so I want you all to benefit from it. Lunch is served. Thank you, Makar. Thank you, Dr. Mamalakis.
Thanks a lot.
So there's going to be 2 buffets just to keep the line going. There's one here and there's one on the side. It's the same. There's, no differences. Let's try to meet back here at 1:45. We're on time. I know we have an hour, but we can take a couple more questions, okay? So see you at 1:45.